You have the opportunity to leave and leave now.
So one of the narratives about the student protests that started in New York and then spread across North America is that outsiders are backing them. Take New York City Mayor Eric Adams' claim about tents, for example.
Why is everybody's tent the same? Was there a fire sale on those tents? There's some organizing going on. You know, there's a well-concerted organizing effort. And what's the goal of that organizing?
To him, there was some outside force involved in supplying protesters. It helped drive this question: is somebody or something actually funding the protests? And how much do they even cost? So we fact-checked this for ourselves to see what's happening here in Canada. So far, we've seen at least 11 pro-Palestinian student protests on campuses across the country. Generally, they want their schools to disclose all investments and divest from companies the groups say support Israel's actions against Palestinians. Some also want the schools to cut ties with Israeli institutions. CBC reporters on the ground have said the protests are mostly student-led, but count alumni, faculty, and community members in their ranks.
Students from different schools are starting to support the encampment.
These students say they've got a lot of supplies and they have a lot of energy.
Solicited donations. I saw some parents coming by with, pots full of food.
Now, outside protesters have bolstered numbers at times. So I went down to the University of Toronto encampment on its second day to see for myself. From what I gleaned, the protesters were largely students. I talked to a professor who's been observing. He's a member of the Jewish Faculty Network. So you've actually seen students you've taught?
Oh yes, many, yeah.
There's also this idea that, this is somehow being funded by groups linked to Hamas and other types of dark money. Who's paying for this?
There's no evidence that I've seen, no credible evidence that there's any kind of organizing like the ones you mentioned that have been funding this. And you see, if you wait at the gate, you see people from the community coming and donating food.
So let's talk money and supplies, what these protesters are asking for, and what it appears they're actually getting. We looked into how student groups and encampments in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver were fundraising. All have asked primarily for physical donations, initially food, clothing, batteries, kitchen supplies. 5 student groups we found asked for money via e-transfer or cash. 3 of those were for potential legal defense funds, while 1 accepted cash donations at a medic tent. We asked them about where those money donations are going. 2 responded. U of T Occupy for Palestine said e-transfers pay for food and extra supplies that haven't been donated. And INSAF, a student group at the University of Ottawa, said it was collecting money for supplies at the encampment, which were coming from all angles, mostly from community members who donate to help our cause. Critics are also alleging the student protesters are part of a conspiracy involving secret money and links to Hamas. It centers on the National Students for Justice in Palestine, one of the main pro-Palestinian campus groups in the US with chapters and allies in Canada. It's been accused of direct links to Hamas, but to be clear, neither US nor Canadian law enforcement has charged any of its members for supporting Hamas. Another allegation, the protests are financed by billionaire George Soros. The far right uses this stereotype of a wealthy Jewish patron secretly funding perceived left-wing causes, like the BLM protests of 2020.
Democrat Party has gone so far left that nobody knows what to do. It's become radical resistance. You ever see their signs? Resist. They'll go to a person holding a sign who gets paid by Soros or somebody.
The irony of these latest allegations is that Soros is a proud Jewish American and a Holocaust survivor. The argument is that Soros's Open Society Foundations has paid to start the encampments. But they're citing grants awarded in 2022, 2 years before the encampments were even conceived. The grants also come with a description from OSF, none of which specifies student protest funding. Open Society Foundations told us it has funded a broad spectrum of US groups that have advocated for the rights of Palestinians and Israelis, and says their funding is both publicly disclosed and fully compliant with US laws. McGill and U of T have both claimed people unaffiliated with their schools are causing problems at the protests. Some call that the outside agitator.
So the concept of the outside agitator is one that we see over and over again in American student history.
I spoke to Angus Johnston, historian of student activism and professor at City University of New York.
Nonviolence is the answer.
If you go back to the civil rights movement, if you go back to the Vietnam War movement, the idea behind the accusation of an outside agitator is at its heart the idea that the community that is rising up, the community that is engaging in this organizing, wouldn't be doing it if not for being spurred on, manipulated, pressured from outside.
It seems like whenever there's a mass movement that's disagreed with, these things are quick to come out. I can assure you, I have very little money. And I'm putting my life on hold to be here.
Did anyone, pay you or influence you to come here yourself, or?
Of course not. I am even appalled that you ask. I'm sorry, because that's, I'm here as a moral obligation to the Palestinian people. I haven't been paid in any sort of way.
And remember the tent theory? MP Kevin Vong insinuated the ones at U of T were part of a broader conspiracy that cost $400 each.
And last night there was about 120 of us who stayed overnight here at this encampment.
And your tents, where are you getting them from?
My understanding is that they were purchased at Walmart. Costco, the cheapest option. I'm not sure. Some of them have been donated. Some of them were purchased by community members.
In fact, I had already Googled cheap tents, which took me to an Uber Eats link for this model from Walmart. Delivered to you for $48.
They're not expensive tents, and the idea that, we can see that they bought a bunch of the same kind of tent, and that is evidence of some sort of a conspiracy. Well, what you do is you go on Amazon, and you find a good cheap tent, and then when you're going to check out, you click 6 instead of 1. You click for however many tents you have enough money to buy. It's not a conspiracy, it's just the logical way to do this.
I put the question of dark money directly to that student organizer.
I think ultimately, we've had just an outpouring of, supplies that are being donated and people are purchasing with their own funds.
Whether or not they're being funded, these types of protests, they're cheap.
We're talking about expenses on the level of hundreds of dollars, maybe a couple of thousand if you've got a really big movement that's lasting for a while. And talking about an amount of money that either can come from the students themselves or can readily be raised from just local supporters.